us tonight to hear our concern. You gave us a bit of a rundown on it. We did not necessarily get all the information that has been presented thus far, and it's really not the time or place to go through what we may or may not have received. But I just wanted to make that point before we begin. We have three major complaints against the book that we shared at the first in emails to the SAU 25, and then also at the book review committee. The first one involves the language in the book. Now, at the meeting, we were prohibited from using the language in the book amongst adults and hopefully graduated minds and college graduates and so forth. We couldn't use the language. So here, tonight, I thought I would try to give a modified version of it so that we can understand what we're dealing with. So on page 42 of Nickel and Dimed, the first line comes from a character, or one of the people she met. It says, "So make up the," and I'm going to change it now, "Father Mucker." So just switch the M and the S, and that's the level of obscenity that we're dealing with. But, of course, it continues. On page 16, now this is a tough one. This has got two obscenities in the same sentence, so this might be tricky for me. So I'm going to spell it. Fuckthishit, exclamation mark within quotations. I guess someone is saying that. And I guess the character replies after a line or two. He's on the blank again. Apparently that word is spelled R-A-G. Okay. She uses that a number of times, and so forth. Okay, that's the tone of many of the words in the book. They're frequent. This is not just one or two that are used. Now, the question, of course, remains as far as when are these words appropriate to use? They're not appropriate for students to use. In fact, they'll be disciplined for that. They're not appropriate for teachers to use with their students, or administrators to use with the teachers and the students. In fact, I asked Assistant Superintendent Chip McGee the following question. I said, "Are you telling me that if a nice school teacher of the high school came in every morning and said, 'Good morning, my blankety blank blank blankety blank 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 uckers, how the blank are you all today?' with a big smile, in as nice a way as is humanly possible to use these words, would that not draw censure from you?" And he, like most people with common sense, he blanched a bit, and he said, "Well, yes, it would." So I've gone to the head of the school system and asked, "Look, if we just use these nicely, can we use them?" And he said, "No, and please don't use them here at the meeting as well." Now, complaint number 2. Erin Reich writes the book from a first-person perspective. She is the star of the book. And she has an anecdote in Maine where she is wandering about. I guess she's got some free time. And she finds a tent revival, and she talks about Jesus Christ. And this is what she says on page, I believe it's 68. "But Jesus makes his appearance here only as a corpse. The living man, the wine-guzzling vagrant and precocious socialist, is never once mentioned, nor anything he ever had to say." I'm trying to be fair to the text. That's what it says. So she calls him a wine-guzzling vagrant. Now, I think in common understanding, someone who guzzles wine is a glutton, a drunk. It's certainly not a positive or even a neutral thing to say about someone else. A vagrant, according to Webster's dictionary, is someone who has no means of support and who travels idly. Now, I happened to come upon today an article in the, I think it was the Nashua Telegraph, in which Barbara Ehrenreich actually responded to some of these issues, and it was interesting what she said. First of all, she said, "Well, I may have been a little harsh about the wine guzzling part, but Jesus was someone who enjoyed a lot of wine." Okay, I think that's fair. She also mentioned that he was an itinerant preacher. Now, this is a woman who has said, on the one hand, he's a vagrant, which by definition means someone who wanders aimlessly without a job. And then she tells us, well, he had a job from which you can earn a living. One can be a preacher in this country, and I'm sure back in Judea, one could do it, and earn a living. So I mention this not to bring her into the argument specifically, but to really caution you all to look at what she says, and please don't try to sugarcoat it and say, well, as she did, all she could say is, well, yeah, maybe I was a little rough about that. In other words, she's saying I was wrong, but I'm really not wrong. And I want to hope we can get that out of this dialogue that we're having, where someone can look at this, read it, and then determine, essentially the opposite. Okay, now, in doing so, I believe that the school, by purchasing this book, by reviewing it, by having a lot of highly educated minds look at it, among dozens and dozens of alternatives, is doing one of two things. Either the school is intentionally agreeing with Ehrenreich, taking the position that Jesus was a drunken bum, or, and I don't know if this is worse, utterly careless in what they present the students. Not really concerned that there might be issues of sensitivity, and I believe legal issues. I believe that my son's state and federal civil rights may have been violated by this procedure. In our First Amendment, there is something called the Establishment Clause, which I believe may be applicable. Highly insulting material. Let's move on to our final area, and that's the drug promotion in the book. Barbara Ehrenreich writes, I think quite honestly, that she's had a chemical indiscretion on page 123. And on that page, if you study it a bit, you'll find that there's a sort of an analysis of how long certain chemicals, illegal chemicals, can stay in our bodies once we take them. And she's concerned, well, she picked the wrong one, because marijuana may interfere with her desire to get a job at one of the big box stores. So she goes on in the chapter to explain how she cleans her urine. So now, I read that as, okay, let's see, I'm a parent of a teenager, I've got a number of children. Do I really want to pay adults, educated adults, to teach my children how to avoid the consequences of illegal activity? I guess I would say, no, I don't. So, again, I would ask you to consider the lack of character that is in that teaching, which leads us to, unless my wife has
she goes on to educate our...
we're making the reasonable case that there are some heavy, essentially illegal obscenities used in the book. There is clear Christian bashing. It's religious bigotry that is sanctioned by the administration, and not only sanctioned. It's been about 3 years that this book has been sitting in the school, and it's been about 3 months since we complained. And really, when I initially complained, it wasn't, oh, we're so sorry, of course. As you would expect any parent, any teenage child that might watch my children would go, oh, I'm so very sorry, sir. Oh, I don't mean to use these obscenities around your children.
And actually, we were told when we contacted the principal that the principal knew nothing about the book. The principal then said that he would get back to us and that he would ask the head of the department, the humanities department. He then called me back, I believe it was a week or two later, and said she knew nothing about this book either, that she was going to read it that weekend. Next time we heard from him after this, she found only one objection in the whole book. One objectionable word, we were told, in the whole book. And it was going to stay. But if you want an alternative, we can look into that. That was the understanding at the time.